Okay, let's call us out to order. Meeting of the West Newbury Board of Selectmen. It's 7:10 p.m. This meeting is being broadcast on local cable TV and recorded for rebroadcast on the local cable channels and on the internet. The meeting is accessible by remote participation. You want to go to meeting, and the access code is 767-572-605. Okay. The tree committee had been congratulations to them and thank them. They have been awarded a DCR Urban and Community Forestry Challenge grant, and I didn't have time to see what the grant is actually for. Do you know, Angus?
I do, but not off the top of my head. I can tell you that it was enumerated in detail in the grant, and we did budget.
It's training. It was for some form of training.
Training, but there were a bunch
right,
of different aspects.
Materials for doing stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, basically we budgeted for the full expense in the proposed FY21 DPW budget, understanding that there was a good chance a portion of that would be reimbursed. Oh, Glenn's on. Good. Let me get him. Okay, Glenn, you should be unmuted.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you. Just as long as nobody can see me. I'm fine.
And for just to remind people, go to the westnewbury.org and subscribe so you can keep up with a lot of things that are going on in town at the moment. Our first item is updates regarding what's going on related to town meeting and so forth, related to the pandemic. So I guess there's been some very recent legislation which I haven't had a chance to read. I don't know if it was passed today. Is Mike there? Does he want to brief us on that?
I'm not seeing Mike on the call, but I know he's in his office.
Somebody's got to mute himself. A lot of background noise. Please mute yourself if you're not talking.
Casey, are you familiar with the very latest regulations on town meeting?
I think this is what you're talking about. I'm not sure, Archie, but there's a statute. There's always been a statute 10A in case of an emergency at the night of town meeting, and it was usually like a weather emergency, a blizzard or a hurricane or something like that, that allows the moderator to recess and continue the meeting to another time because of the public safety hazard. And the new legislation has expanded that to include public health emergency. And so that gives me the right, in consultation with you and the other people and the public health and everybody, to recess and continue the meeting up to 30 days from the original posted date, and to continue to do that until such a time as the governor lifts the state of emergency. So in other words, I can recess and continue it for up to 30 days and from the time that it's scheduled. And then if it's still a problem after that, I can do it again. And I can keep doing that until such time as the state of emergency has been lifted. And I believe that's the legislation that you're talking about.
So can we go beyond so we don't know when the government will lift the state of emergency, obviously. So whatever it is, we can add 30 to it. That's the basic tenet.
We can keep, I'm going to just use the word postpone. We can keep postponing the town meeting in up to 30-day chunks until such time, or we can postpone it and then decide to have it. We don't have to keep postponing it. If we decide to use some alternative means of having the town meeting, then we can do that before the state of emergency is lifted.
Okay.
We do have Mike on the line now. Mike, did you have
So,
anything to add?
I guess you have proposed extending it out again, but picking a day in the end of June. So is that right?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Yes, I proposed today, the largest number of cases of coronavirus that have been tracked have been contracted by contact indoors. And the mass moderators gavel line, which is a, email thread, we've been discussing what to do about these town meetings. And there's a lot of sentiment for not wanting to have it indoors. There are various things you can do to have it indoors. For example, using many rooms in the high school so that people can spread out and not be close to each other. But they all have problems, and it seems fairly consistent that most of the moderators think it would be better to try to have an outdoor meeting. And so I'm proposing that we continue it for 30 days, that we recess and continue for 30 days, up to 30 days. It doesn't have to be 30 days, but up to 30 days, until such time as we can discuss the logistics of having a possible outdoor meeting. And then once we get to that point, if it still seems problematic, we can continue it again, but then we run into the problem of the June 30th deadline for passing a budget. So we're working on, I talked to Angus and Paul Savigny today, and we're working on logistics of trying to put together an outdoor meeting so that people could be very separated and also not have the indoor air problem.
I think that's a good idea, because we have to remember too, if we haven't driven down by the school, they've already fenced stuff off, and especially the high school, and starting construction down there. So I don't even think the high school would be an option. I don't know that, but there's, fencing, and you can't get in there any longer, and so forth and so on down there.
Yeah, if they've started to work, they're not going to want to break things down, and start to let people on site. That would be complicated.
Casey, would you be thinking of a and I know this is totally premature, but a daytime meeting versus an evening meeting, or what would the time frame be? What have the other moderators been talking about?
If it's going to be outdoors, obviously it's going to have to be daytime. So it would be, while the sun's up. And
What day is the 27th? I don't have my calendar in front of me.
The 27th, was that the day?
of June?
Yeah.
Okay.
Casey, what date is that you were thinking of, Casey? Is the 27th?
I was thinking of the Saturday, because if we're going to do it during the day, some people are still working. And so that would keep them from attending. And if it's going to be outdoors, we have to have it during the day, daylight hours, so that we can see.
Fewer mosquitoes too. Yeah.
Well, everybody should bring.
Also, in the middle of the day, sunlight, that's the summer solstice basically. So the sun will be really intense unless it's overcast. So,
right.
if we do it outside in the middle of the day in the summer, is it practical to get a tent up? And how expensive is that?
Well, the more you restrict airflow, the more you mimic an indoor situation.
Yeah,
Which is-
that makes sense. But you know, if you have one of those tents and you have, you know, essentially 10-foot high or close, you know, 8 to 10 foot high opening, I mean, there's going to be still a fair amount of airflow through there.
As long as it was just a sort of a roof tent, but no closed sides.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah, just to keep the sun off.
Fairly available. I mean, we did one for the bicentennial, and it wasn't to find.
Plus, if you have it in June, I mean, it's light out till 9:30,
Right.
because that's
right.
that's the summer solstice. So if you started at 5, it would be in the later afternoon. The sun wouldn't be as strong, and then you'd have a good 4 hours
Yeah.
before darkness would come.
Yeah, the advantage of a tent too is that way, if it's, unless it's pouring, you know, if it's mildly inclement weather, then you could still do it because you'd be in the tent. And or under the, not in a tent, but under a tent, you know, with something over your head. And you could, you know, we could just use, you know, the equivalent of survey tape to lay out areas on the floor, so you keep separation between individuals or between, you know, families. You know, we could lay out. I was wondering, how big is the riding ring? Is the riding ring?
Well, the whole thing is predicated on how many people are going to show up.
Right.
So, I mean, we can make estimates and try to figure out what we're expecting. But you know, I think the riding ring theoretically would be big enough, but I don't know if there's a tent that's quite that size. The one we had at the bicentennial was pretty large.
That was a big tent, yeah.
Yeah, and but there's a little calculator you can get online that tells you if you're expecting X number of people, how many square feet of space you need so that they can all be 6 feet apart. And so, you know, I can't do it right now because I'm talking on my computer to you, but I can, you know, go and calculate how many square feet we would need for, say, 100 people. And then for 200 people.
These are logistics that are a month and a half away. I mean, conceptually at this point, I would say let's have this discussion, but the finer points you work out with the Wayne, DPW, Angus, and all the people that really need to do that.
Right. And that's really why I think we need to postpone. I mean, if we just decided to do it outdoors, theoretically we could do it outdoors on June 1st, but that would not give us time to do all this, Glenn, you're right. And we really have to have enough time to put together what we're gonna do. But the tent's a good idea, so I'll definitely check out what square feet we would need to cover and see what that would be. But
then you have to think about budget, because a tent like that's probably $2,000 or $3,000, maybe $4,000.
Steve, how much was the tent for this bicentennial committee?
Glenn's probably close, and I have to check.
Yeah, we have numbers on that because we rented the tent, but they're
Yeah,
not.
but it's like $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 for a tent that big. I mean, if you want a really, really big one, or maybe a couple of grand, because you don't need tables. All you need to do is have people standing around or just sitting in seats.
Right. Yeah, we don't have to have tables, but we do have to have enough space so that people. And then one of the towns that's done this, actually, they did it in a parking lot so that every stood in a separate parking space, but it was a very large parking lot. But they suggested that, you know, if couples come to town meeting, they could actually stand in the same space because they're breathing each other's air all along anyway.
Right.
So to the extent that people come in pairs, you might not need quite as much space as you would if everybody was an individual.
So that's the one, Casey, that's the one instance where you know that a town actually did one and it worked?
Town did one. Now, the one thing I want to say about that is that they had not posted their warrant before they decided to do that. And this was early on, and they had a couple of articles that were really time sensitive because they needed to treat their lakes before a certain time in the spring. And that was up before timing. So they limited their warrant to 3 articles so that they could do this. And they did it in a parking lot, and they got very little discussion. And that's the hard part in that kind of scenario is how to handle the discussion. But they did do it, and it worked.
Is there, I did read about some towns that have, electronic voting. Everyone gets a little handheld device, and so that no one has to raise their hands and that kind of thing. But I wonder if, and maybe that's something we can think about for the future even, but not for, I just wonder if there's some way that it could be electronic, like what we're doing now. Would there be a way for people to use their cell phone to communicate the question to you, the chair, and then you could communicate that to everybody else?
Well,
So then we wouldn't have to pass a microphone around, and we wouldn't, and people wouldn't have to be walking around.
well, passing a microphone around would be dreadful. You couldn't do
Right.
that. And in fact, even if you had a fixed microphone and you were asking people to just go to the microphone to speak, you would have to sterilize it between every
Right,
speech.
so both of those options are bad.
An electronic meeting like this is not legal. So our choices are to either meet in a room or rooms, or to do an outdoor meeting. The one suggestion that a lot of people had, if you're planning on doing an outdoor meeting, so that discussion is a problem, that it would be a good idea to have some forums ahead of time that you could do electronically, just open forums for people to discuss the warrant, so that by the time we got to the town meeting, people had already had a chance to express themselves, and the issues were out there, so that we didn't have to have extended discussion on the
You need a bullhorn and everybody needs to yell, and I think everybody will understand, and we just do the best of it.
yeah.
Casey gets a bullhorn and everybody yells.
You just have to be flexible and roll with it. It's not the best
Right.
of all possible worlds, but
But just think, it's a good day out for all of us. We're all in our house.
another possibility that someone suggested was to put a microphone on a boom and just kind of lower it.
I think that's a good idea. I mean, that's used in other, we've probably all seen that used in other venues, and, people you don't have to touch the microphone if you get the right microphone.
Right, if it's close enough, you can do it.
Right.
But
I'm
actually,
getting a text. That can happen. We could do that. I'm getting a text now, but we can do that if we needed to. But, do you really need to go through all that?
well, there are other things that we discussed today. There are ways to sort of consolidate the warrant a little bit so that we don't have 24 articles that we have to try to get through at an outdoor meeting. So we can try to consolidate things a little bit. And, people are pretty reasonable. I mean, when we have our normal town meeting in the annex, people aren't reluctant to express themselves because that's what we're there for. But this is an unusual situation. And so, unless you really feel very, very strongly about something, people will probably understand that, just constantly getting up over and over again is not a good idea in this circumstance. But that's one of the reasons why trying to have some sort of a discussion online before the meeting might help people feel like they were able to air their concerns a little bit before they got to the meeting, so that it's not like, well, you can't talk. Because that would goes against the purpose and spirit of the meeting. I think so,
So Casey, do we need to, that seems like a reasonable date to me. Do we need to come to some sort of agreement or should the board vote on this or what do you think?
actually sign the piece of paper that I have to sign that says that we're going to recess and continue. We do have to have a time and place certain. It has to be delineated in the.
It's actually the town moderator's decision with,
Right.
in consultation with the Board of Selectmen and the public safety officials and public health officials, which he's already done today, with our discussions with Angus and with Paul Savigny and the like. So it's really what you give the Board of Selectmen is a recommendation, and Casey makes the final decision.
Well, my recommendation would be to go with what Casey has suggested of having it that last, is it the 27th, the last Saturday in June?
I think it is, but let me just double check.
It is.
I like the idea of a Saturday, and now we just have to come up with a time.
In my experience, towns with Saturday town meetings typically start in the morning, typically like 9 o'clock, something like that.
Casey, hypothetically, we set it for 9 o'clock. We have showers, it's raining, but it's going to be a gorgeous day by 1. Can we postpone it till 1 o'clock?
We can call a recess. We've done that before when we've had problems.
Yeah.
We call it recess, and then a couple of times we had to go to Pentucket because we had too many people.
Yep.
And we just recessed the meeting until everybody could get to Pentucket. And so but I think 9's a little early, and I'll tell you why. Another logistical problem that I'm dealing with is that we have to get people wherever it is. Now, I had forgotten about there being construction stuff around the school. So today, when we were talking about a venue, we were talking about the high school campus. But if it's been roped off and everything's to the point where it's too small, then we would have to find another place. Now, we always have pipe stave, which is very large. And I'm sure we could put stuff up there to accommodate the meeting. And I don't know about the bandstand area. It's not quite as large, but depending on how many people are intending to attend the meeting, we might be able to do something out there in that lawn behind the bandstand area.
Yeah,
You have the fields there.
I think we need to be off grass though, because grass is going to be terrible for mosquitoes. I mean, mosquitoes are going to be just starting to really ramp up at that point. And if we're on a grass surface, they're going to be terrible. So I think we want to be on a surface that's not friendly to mosquitoes, so maybe the parking area where the horse trailers park, or maybe that's why I mentioned the riding ring, because, again, that's not a grass surface.
Well, there is grass in the middle of the large one.
Yeah, there's a lot of there's grass there too.
There's grass there too. So that's not perfect. That's why the parking lot was, in the one town that's done it, they were lucky to have a very large parking lot where they could spread people out in the parking spaces. Well, we could look into having it sprayed. I mean, we did that for the.
I'd rather, let's not get into that with the beehive. We can work this out. Let's say 10 o'clock. So I just used 9 o'clock just as a hypothetical about if it was raining.
I started to say about that because it's kind of important. We have to get people wherever it is. They have to drive or walk or bike or whatever. They have to park. Then they have to sign in. And these are all situations where social distancing is going to be more difficult than once you get to the venue where you can spread yourselves out. And that to me translates into more time. So if you say the meeting's going to start at 9, people would have to start to arrive sometime around 7 to be able to keep social distance, get out of cars, get to the place where we're going to have the meeting, get checked in, and get themselves settled. It's going to take longer than a normal town meeting where we all just go and sit down someplace. So I think 9 o'clock is, maybe we can have people start to arrive at 9 o'clock. 10 is more reasonable to actually start the meeting. And while we're discussing the logistics of all of this, we'll have to talk about those issues. Where are we going to tell people to park? How are we going to tell them to get from their cars to the meeting safely? People are going to are we still wearing masks at that point? Are we going to have to all wear masks during the meeting? And, there are a lot of details that we're going to have to iron out before we can actually, have a plan. So I wouldn't plan it too early. Excuse me, but because it is near the summer solstice. I mean, we could literally be there until 8 o'clock at night, and it would still be light. So, but the other, we have other issues too, like porta potties and things like that.
There's certainly enough parking there, because if a lot of people did come, they can park across the street at the paid school too.
Right. And as long as they
Page School, is the big parking lot in back of Page School, is that a candidate?
I don't know. I haven't seen it lately. It is rather large.
Yeah. I guess we just need to look at all potential spaces.
Okay, I think we can talk about all the details, but to move it along, I would recommend that we schedule the annual and special town meeting for Saturday, June 27th, starting at approximately 10 a.m. and the details to be worked out later.
Okay, I'll second that.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye. So obviously we still need to confirm the venue, and Glenn, I didn't hear Glenn actually. Glenn, you still there?
I think we lost Glenn.
I didn't hear him either.
Angus,
Okay.
can you see if Glenn is still around?
No, it does not look, I don't see him.
Casey, just really briefly, so how would you talked about coalescing some warrant articles. How would that work?
Well, I have a message into the Mass Moderators Association listserv. There's a type of a motion that can be made. It's not in town meeting times, so we've never used it before, but it is in Robert's rules and we can adopt it. It's called a consent agenda. And it's used in town meetings where they have numbers of articles, and we do too, that have very little discussion, that they just pass every year, pass. So rather than take
Like the septic loan thing or something like that.
Yeah. And so rather than taking them up one by one and, what's the recommendation of the finance committee, and somebody makes a motion, and, that all takes time. So rather than doing that, they're lumped into one motion, and that's called the consent agenda. And the motion is now you can't do any amendments, and the motion is the article. So it's just whatever's written in the article, that becomes the motion.
Okay.
And it's for all of those items that we decide that are going to get no discussion and just get passed routinely every year. And then the motion is to pass all of them. And so they all get passed at once, and that's that, and they're dismissed. Now, I know that's possible because a lot of towns do that. The question that came up today is, because I understand that the selectmen have a number of articles they might move no action on, just to expedite things. And the question came up, can you do a consent agenda to vote no action on a whole group of articles? And I think that's probably okay, but I wasn't sure because it's not in town meeting time. It's a Robert's Rules thing. And so I posted a question on the listserv. Is there any reason why we can't do this for no action on a group of articles? And they'll get right back to me. It's a very good listserv, so.
Okay, well, that seems like a good time saver, yeah.
Yeah.
Can't do it for the whole meeting, though.
Well,
Just kidding.
yeah, that would be nice, but I don't think it'll work.
No.
But we can all just discuss this over Zoom or whatever, and pick out what articles can just be done that way, so that, because there are numbers of articles that we have every year that they just pass. And every now and then somebody wants to say something, but it's not really all that critical. And I think,
Forbes, Dury, Finance Committee, just a very quick question here to throw out. Who would be the group of people deciding which articles were lumped into this?
it doesn't matter, Forbes, because there is a provision for somebody to say they want one removed. I mean, it's not just a done deal just because the selectmen and you, the finance committee, or whoever decides that these are the articles that could be grouped. Anyone at the meeting can object and can say that they want an article removed from the consent agenda.
Absolutely understood. Just saying that once you pre-select a group, you're sort of headed down a path, and if that that path may not be agreeable to everyone, but you're moving that way. That's the only reason why I'm asking about that, and who's in that group. That's all. Just, I think a little definition there would be helpful for town voters.
Well, if we decided to do that, which I'm not promoting this at all, because we've never done it before, and I've never felt like we had a need to before. So, it's totally up to the group. But the way it was laid out to me is that these are articles that historically and traditionally have just not gotten any particular discussion or any particular pushback. For example, when we put the CPC money into the various categories, not when we take it out, but when we put it in. It's sort of a boilerplate thing. I mean, we do it every year. There aren't very many options on that. It's done by a formula, and we do it. When we vote on the water department,
Like the instructions for the water commissioners.
right?
I knew somebody was going to do that this year.
Where we transfer the money from their revolving account or whatever it is into their active account. I mean, nobody discusses those. They just sort of go. Which isn't to say that somebody wouldn't want to discuss them this year. I mean, you never know what's going to come up at a town meeting. But there are certain ones, and so the people that have been involved in town meeting all these years sort of know which ones they are, and would select them. But the meeting, the town still has the option to say, no, I don't want to lump that one in there. And it comes back out again.
Okay, well, I think that's good. Let's, all of these are great suggestions. I think the first place is, the next thing to do is we've got a date. Now we've got to check out a couple of the venues and just see where there's enough room.
Right, and as soon as, if everyone's in agreement that this is the best way to go, as soon as you get back to me with the venue, we've got the date and the time. As soon as you get back to me with the venue, I'll sign this form that I have, and we can get the thing rolling. We're not really under a lot of pressure because the original meeting is, the date right now is June 1st. So we have time to find a venue. So don't feel like, this has to be done tomorrow, but we need to do it before the actual meeting was scheduled.
Okay. Thanks, Casey. That's great.
Okay.
Maybe, Archie, maybe by the next meeting, the next regularly scheduled meeting on the 25th of May, we would resolve all that stuff and then you'd be in a position that would work, right, Casey?
Yeah, that works.
Yeah.
The thing is, you do need to make sure that you have enough time that people are properly notified that this is going to happen.
Yep.
And
That's a month ahead,
so you wouldn't want to do it the day before June 1st.
Right. Yeah, I would have some concern actually about letting it go that long. I know with the FinCom booklet, that's nearly done, and in the normal course of things, they'd be dropping that off at the printer in 2 days. I'm not sure if they may extend that a little bit to, so something can get in there on the date change. But,
Okay.
it seems to me it would be a mistake to print a couple of hundred FinCom booklets and circulate them without making our best effort at knowing the date and location, even if some of the logistics are still coming together. So I would think if we could, get to some details, ideally the end of this week, maybe the first of next week at the latest. I don't know, Forbes, do you have a thought on that? And
Nope. I sooner is better, obviously, but there's no way to predict how fast things are going to reopen. So I mean, it's a logistical sort of nightmare that we're stuck in. The book is done. The only concern is if the articles are grouped together, how does that affect things? But we'll just have to deal with that when we deal with it.
Forbes, I mean, we've never done this before, so,
I get it. I totally get it. This is
But I
unusual
think
times.
the group, since we haven't done this before, and since we didn't plan for this time, the motion would be the first motion taken up under the town meeting. But the articles could be 4, 7, 15, and 23. I mean, they don't have to be in order or anything like that. And so, one of the selectmen would make the motion to do the consent agenda. So the most important thing would be to explain to people what's happening, because we've never done it before. So people understood, and make sure that they had enough time to ask questions about it and look at the articles that we were proposing to put on a consent agenda, so that they would know if they wanted to take one off. So we have to give them time. If we decided that this was a good thing to do in the future, then the consent agenda usually just becomes the first article on the warrant. And they just take the order.
Mike, did I understand you correctly earlier that the decision on the location and some of the logistics is really the moderator's decision?
That is correct.
It is.
That's correct.
Okay,
But
so while, the next meeting was suggested as kind of a milestone, which obviously these meetings are very important in terms of, providing public notice. But if I'm understanding correctly, the board doesn't need to take an action on that. Is that right, Mike?
No, they've already, this is the action of the board, the consultation with the town moderator. And then it's up to the moderator.
And I would certainly consult with, especially Paul, because Paul Savigny, because he's very knowledgeable about the current situation with social distancing and stuff like that. And probably with Wayne and other people who know about venues and how difficult it would be to set them up.
I don't have a mute button. This one.
Hey, Paul, do we have you on the line?
Here, I'm here.
Oh, you are? Okay, good. I had everyone muted who I didn't see their name, and so I thought you might be one of the numbered callers. So I just figured out who you are by process of elimination. So Paul, did you have something to add to the discussion?
No, I think it's all going heading in the right direction. I think we can meet up this week. Like I said, as long as it's not a board or committee and it won't violate any open meeting law, we can meet with Wayne and Casey and whoever else and go over the ideas and measure some spaces and do some more logistics so we can come up with a venue next week, like you said.
Okay.
Are you still there?
Once we choose a venue, then there will be a lot of logistics to sort of discuss. And so I'll work with, Paul and Wayne and Angus and anyone else who wants to be involved, really, to try to work out the details as best we can. And I'm keeping an eye on, or an ear to, what other towns are doing right now. There are other towns that are planning outdoor meetings. So any insight, advice, whatever I can get from anybody else will be helpful for us.
Casey, I think, if I remember correctly, I have friends who used to live in Harvard, Mass. And I think Harvard traditionally does outdoor town meetings.
Oh, we used to in West Newbury.
Okay.
Many years ago, they had.
Yeah, but I mean, in current times, I think they have done out. So it might be interesting to talk with communities that do it in current times and see how they pull it off.
They don't have to have social distancing, so it's.
Right, yeah.
They essentially do a wonderful town picnic, and everybody comes and has the picnic, and then they all sit down and have the town meeting, and it's sort of a big celebration. It sounds like fun, actually. But I haven't seen anything from the moderator of Harvard on any of this stuff. That's funny.
Okay. Yeah,
But,
I could be wrong. Maybe it was a one-time event or something. But.
There
Okay,
are
good.
people who remember the days when West Newbury used to do that, the outdoor meeting.
Did you have to get the cows off?
The one thing the board of selectmen do have to do in accordance with this is that they have to select or designate a local public safety or public health official who will submit a report to the Attorney General providing the justification for the continuance. So that's one thing the Board of Selectmen is supposed to do, which you could do tonight. I recommend Paul.
I would recommend Paul.
Is that a motion? I'll second.
It should be.
All in favor?
Aye.
Glenn, do you have you? Let's see, Glenn. Okay, thank you all. That's one small thing, but one big thing done. And if Paul is still there, Paul, do you want to give? Do you want to talk very briefly about the possible reopening of the mill pond and so forth, or is that premature?
No, I can do it now if you want me to.
Sure.
All right, so as the Board of Selectmen know, and the residents, Board of Health had shut down Mill Pond and Pipestay parking areas due to the COVID concerns of social distancing, gathering in the crowds, whatnot. I think that was on April 3rd. We had pushed it to May 4th, and then last week we pushed it out to May 18th. But we've been looking at the trends in the data between various deaths as well as positive number of cases, number of testing, whatnot, and we feel that at this point the trends have gone down in the last week or so. We understand that, there is a nice town resource out there. People are getting stir crazy from being cooped up in the house and isolation and quarantining themselves. So I think at this point, the Board of Health would recommend to the Selectmen, if the Selectmen choose to do so, that I think that we could open up Mill Pond and Pipe Stave parking areas for residents only. We could have this set in place 2 weeks from today, which I think would be the 25th of May. This will allow the residents to utilize the town property, get some fresh air exercise, as well as trying to keep the residents safe with limiting it to residents only, so we don't have the out-of-towners coming, because a lot of other towns have shut down their parks, beaches, dog parks, and the like. So whatever opens up first in the area, it will get all the people. So I guess it's that's the Board of Health recommendation, is we could do that. We've been talking about it the last couple of weeks, so it's really up to the Selectmen now to decide whether they want to act on that, open it up to residents only, or keep it shut until further notice.
Well, question to Mike is there any legal question about designating it residents only?
The Board of Selectmen, in their powers to regulate the operation of carriages and vehicles, can regulate parking on town-owned property. Obviously, I checked with other municipalities. The town of Reading, the town of Rockport, obviously have areas that are parking that are available only to residents.
And we also did find, in terms of the Mill Pond, Greenbelt has deferred to the town in terms of, because they are the managers of the Mill Pond through the conservation restriction, but they have deferred to the town in this situation to limit access due to the pandemic. So they are deferring to us on that, in that the situation. So Greenbelt will not be objecting to us doing that.
Rick and Glenn, if you're on, I had spoken to Dave Rimmer at Greenbelt earlier today, just to look into that question on the suggestion of someone volunteering with the Board of Health. So I'll send that, and I got a written, after speaking with Dave Rimmer, and he told me that verbally, he did send a written confirmation of that. So I'll send that to you just so you have it.
So I would make a motion that in accordance with the recommendations of the Board of Health and the health agent, that according to their schedule, we do set up parking signs on the parking areas and a system of registering vehicles. People, I won't get into the details, but so people will put it on their dashboard that they are West Newbury resident, and go from there. So that hopefully we'll be able to get this up and running, so it'll work before Memorial Day.
And Archie, I would draw your attention to the language of the proposed motion that Mike McCarron had drawn up, which
Right.
basically says what you said. It's a little more legalistic.
Right.
I don't think it's in your package, Archie.
Oh,
I think
okay.
it was an email.
All right. I got the.
And he just resent it. He had sent it earlier, but he resent it just a few minutes ago, so it should be in your
Okay,
inbox.
let me get that. Hang on one second.
I sent it to you too, Rick.
I've got it. I move that the town, pursuant to the power given to the Board of Selectmen by Chapter 40, Section 22 of the General Laws of Massachusetts, and by virtue of any other power it hereto enabling, hereby adopt the following rule for the regulation of vehicles and parking of vehicles for the Mill Pond Pipe Stave recreation areas. Number one, parking at Mill Pond Pipe Stave recreation areas shall be limited to town residents who have a parking permit. Number two, any resident wishing to use the parking areas at the Mill Pond Pipe Stave recreation areas shall first obtain a parking permit from the town. And three, any violator shall be subject to fines and penalties, including but not limited to towing of unpermitted vehicles in accordance with provisions of General Law, Chapter 40, Section 22D.
I'll second.
I also have a text from Glenn that he's not here right at the moment. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
So, thank you, Paul, for all the work on that and all the work you've been doing. Great.
So Archie,
Thank
before
you.
we leave this subject, I did want to say a couple of words that Paul's been deeply involved with this as well, but at the board's last meeting, there was just a very initial acknowledgement that there's planning underway at the staff level for when we do get to, reopening in some phased fashion town facilities, including the 1910 building, as well as the library and the Council on Aging. So each of those efforts is kind of on a parallel track. We've circulated some materials among some key department heads, gotten a bunch of feedback. And in fact, this afternoon, thanks to the health department, they've been doing a great job of communicating with all staff, including people working remotely, and have been getting a lot of feedback on what staff's kind of hopes, expectations, concerns would be with regard to opening. So we have a lot of raw material, and we've got a meeting tomorrow afternoon with the Council on Aging to look at their particular concerns and needs. And the Library Board of Trustees is also meeting tomorrow evening to take a look at a preliminary plan that they've put together for kind of a phased reopening. And they provided that to my office and to Paul last week for some preliminary review. So I don't have anything definitive to say. Obviously, we don't know anything about dates. Paul is, I believe, still on the line, so he may want to elaborate. I just wanted to let you know that work is underway. Once we have something that's further along, I'm happy to share that. But at this point, we've got a lot of raw material that we're looking to synthesize.
Thank you. Any further comments on that? Our next item is a request from the Pawtucket Arts Foundation to host a reverse arts parade. The idea being that performers and artists would be set up in different areas of the three Pawtucket communities, and they would be socially distancing, and the viewers would be able to drive by in their cars. And the plan was to have it sometime around the 4th of July timeframe. So, Jen, anything further that you would know about this and could give us a little more information on this?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Okay. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Pawtucket Arts Fund, you summed it up pretty well, David. We met for the first time last week since the shutdown, and we received a donation from Essex County Community Foundation as part of their pandemic relief efforts for artists and arts foundations. And the board talked about how we would like to combine this generous gift with funds that we had targeted for our 2020 Arts Connecting Community Public Art grant, which we are not going to be able to do, obviously, this year. So we thought about a lot of different things, and one of the things that came to the table was the reverse parade. The idea is to have an arts event that will unify the community as well as support local fine and performing artists who have been, as you know, hit particularly hard by the pandemic. And those are both parts of our mission. So it seemed to be like a good idea. The board asked me to bring it to you guys and the other town leaders in the other 2 towns of the Pawtucket region to see if you would be interested in something like this. We're also open to other ideas. We talked about July 4th. That might be ambitious. I think we were just thinking that it was so sad that we were not going to be able to have that Memorial Day parade, which is so, a lot of people really get a real boot out of that. So we were trying to quickly come together with something. I mean, it might also be something that we could do at Labor Day if we thought would be a better time. But obviously, the sooner we can figure this out and get the call out to artists, the more response we would hopefully get. But it's something that obviously you guys have to feel comfortable with, and the Board of Health and et cetera. So that's about it.
I thought I was certainly open to the idea. It sounds like a wonderful idea. I just had one thought. Suppose someone is playing the French horn or something, and you want to listen to that, then if
it'll be slow. Is that what you're thinking? It'll slow everything down?
Archie, lost you. Archie, I think we lost your audio. Maybe I lost everybody's sound.
Archie, you repeat what you said.
Say someone's playing the French horn and you want to hear the entire piece that person is doing. If there was people following along on a particular route of
I just did it because you can't hear Angus, but you can hear him on the phone. Let me know if you have the numbers. If you don't, I'll give them to you.
Oh, that was caller 48 or caller 47. Just so you know, Archie, when people call in, it doesn't automatically mute them. I have to manually mute them. So I have to kind of keep an eye on that side of the screen. So that's why that happens.
Okay. So
no, I get that. And I don't have a firm answer for you other than the musicians and the vocal singers would have to be, the dancers too, I suppose, all the performing artists would have to be advised to do something very brief. It would be the idea you're not speeding through this, you're going through it slowly. But yeah, I mean, that's one of the issues. Like I said, we're in the really early planning stages, so I'm not sure about all those things. We're just trying to get a sense of whether or not this is even viable in terms of the town's comfort level with organizing something that will bring the community together at this point.
I think it would have to be on a weekend day.
Okay.
So regarding the town organize, I think it's a really cool idea, Jen. I think it's great because we all need something light right now.
Yeah.
And this would be light, it sounds like fun. Sure. The question is, and Angus, this may be a question that you'll have some insight to, organizationally, given the current stresses organizationally, is the bandwidth.
Right.
I didn't really read this as something that would really have any impact on town time other than obviously helping to promote it and get the word out.
Yeah, I mean, we would probably need to hire some detail from the police just to keep things, make sure everyone stays in their cars and that kind of stuff. I envision that. But yeah, most of it would be us planning it.
Maybe, it might figure a special event permit, something like that. But there's no fee there, and it's not what I have left.
And I think we would love to have sort of, once we kind of get a little bit, can give you a little bit more sense of what it's going to look like, to have some feedback on you about where the parade route might be, rather than us just saying this is where we want to do it. Certainly the weekend is a good suggestion. And then where in town would that happen? So that's not for a decision for tonight, but I could imagine some feedback from the town on that would be great.
Good. Well, thanks. I guess in principle, I'm totally think it's a good idea. Yeah, great idea.
Okay. So, and does everybody feel that way? All three selectmen?
I'm not sure if Glenn's here. I do. I agree.
Okay, and Angus feels okay because it's not going to be too much.
Oh, yeah, yeah, 100%.
Okay. Okay, great. So then the next thing that you want to hear from us is just a little more detail on how we envision it coming together. What are your thoughts about July, around the July 4th time? Is that too quick?
I don't know. It's a month and a half away.
Yeah, yeah.
I hope not.
I hope not too. Yeah, yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I'll move forward then. And I have not spoken to either of the other towns yet. You guys were the first ones to get it on your agenda, so I appreciate that. And I'll move forward and anticipate coming back maybe early in June with some more information.
Okay, good.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Glenn.
Next item is updates regarding the Coffin Street, Main Street 40B housing proposal and scheduling a public workshop on 40B and so forth. And Angus will be the best person to give us the details on that.
Okay, so earlier this afternoon, just a few hours ago, I posted the town website and circulated by email a series of updates on this project, and so I'll just summarize that for those who may not have seen it. I just want to start by making sure everyone's clear. There is no permit pending before the town of West Newbury. This is a project eligibility letter that the developer has applied for with Mass Housing. Mass Housing has sought comments from the town of West Newbury, and we have until Tuesday, June 16th to get our comments to Mass Housing. And then they are the authority that decides whether to issue a project eligibility or letter or not, and if so, subject to any conditions they may add. So unless and until the developer receives a project eligibility letter, they cannot apply for a 40B comprehensive permit locally. So that's just to kind of set the stage. So with that said, a lot of departments, boards, committees, and commissions are actively underway with their review. We had circulated all the materials we received right away, and I've gotten some comments back from some department heads. I've checked in with all the department heads or boards and commissions that I hadn't heard from, just to make sure that they are actively reviewing it. And for those that I hadn't seen it on a posted agenda, to make sure that it's going to be on an upcoming agenda. So I can, tell you that everyone's actively looking at it within the town organization. More broadly, we've gotten over 100 sets of comments at this point from residents and neighbors, which is extremely helpful. That helps to identify issues, some of which can be looked at within the project eligibility period, others which help frame the issues that would need a deeper dive if and when a project gets to the permitting stage. So we've kind of set I'll call it a deadline of June 1st. That's not so much a hard deadline, but it's pretty important just to make sure that my office and the Board of Selectmen get comments, at least a couple of weeks prior to when the board's comments are due to Mass Housing, to give us time to synthesize all of that. Beyond that, I've requested that comments from boards, commissions, committees, and departments aim more for the mid-May timeframe. That's not a hard deadline, but sooner is better because it gives us more time to review. But, especially with the departments and boards, commissions, they need to take the time that they need to take. So we want people to have the time to provide thoughtful comments, and our goal is not to put anyone under pressure to get comments before they're ready. It's more just to make sure that the board has some advance time to really, process those and understand those. So a couple of things coming up. This Thursday, the Board of Selectmen has scheduled a special meeting That's going to be this Thursday, May 14th at 6:30 p.m. And we recently engaged Attorney John Witten with KP Law. KP is the town's outside counsel that we use from time to time. And John is one of the most experienced attorneys in the Commonwealth when it comes to 40B, in particular with representing and advising municipalities. So we've engaged him to come in and give a public workshop informational session about 40B, which I think will be extremely helpful to get everyone the same information on the statute, the regs, and how we can best, position the town to process any proposal that may come forward. Within that meeting this Thursday, the board will also invite comments from participants regarding any aspect of 40B, including the current request that's before Mass Housing. I do want to say the workshop itself is likely to be about an hour and a half, so people should gear up. It is, there's a lot of information, but if you want to understand the statute, it's very, very important because it's different than other permitting processes. So I think I know, and I've known John almost 20 years, it will be time well spent. He's a really knowledgeable guy. That meeting will be recorded and broadcast both on local cable and subsequently on the town YouTube channel. So if you can't be there Thursday, it will be available after that. This Friday, the Board of Selectmen will conduct a site visit of the property. That'll be Friday at 10 a.m. However, due to public health concerns, public attendance is not going to be permitted at the site walk. We're aware that differs from statements that have been made at prior meetings, but that really is, it's first of all, it's the developer has site control and he has the right to restrict attendance, but also that restriction is fully in accord with public health guidelines and social distancing. So we are setting up to have the site walk video recorded, and that will be produced. We're not going to just upload the raw video. That would probably be pretty dull, but we'll have our AV tech put that together and put that onto a local cable and onto the YouTube channel as soon as possible after the site walk on Friday. The FAQ that has been talked about is still underway. It's taking obviously quite a bit longer than I had hoped, and that's partly a result of just staff constraints and only so much time in the day, but it's also, we keep getting new questions and new comments and a lot of very thoughtful questions. So we want to make sure that we're responsive to those. And finally, I just wanted to make the board and the public aware the Board of Appeals is looking closely at its regulations. The 40B regulations were not amended since 2002. So that's actually part of the scope that we have retained KP Law to assist us to get local regulations updated so that if and when a proposal comes forward formally, the town's in the best position to ensure that we can do the type of analysis that we would need to do. So that's what's been happening.
So I just to reiterate what Angus said, after we hear the sort of general learning session about 40B from KP Law next Thursday evening, after that the board would really, because we understand we wanted to have people at the site, but that's not going to work out. We want to have people give us recommendations, things that we may not be looking for. So we want people to give us things that we can look for on the sidewalk. So we'll take comments on that immediately following the 40B workshop. And you could also send them in also ahead of time to email them into the town manager too. Okay, and hearing no further comments about that. We're gonna have an update on what's happening with the borrowing situation for the water projects and the carports.
Okay, so as you know, we issued bond anticipation notes last winter to provide some short-term financing for the water capital projects now underway, both the water tower and the treatment building for the bedrock well. Those notes will mature on July 17th. So by that time, we will need to either issue permanent financing for that project, for those projects, or roll those forward into more bond anticipation notes. So what you have in front of you in your packet is a calendar with the anticipation that we would roll these forward into bands. And the reason for that is we feel it's financially advantageous to bundle the borrowing for these projects with the Soldiers and Sailors borrowing. Based on the size of the bond issue, we think we'll get favorable borrowing terms and more interest from the market when the time comes. With that said, we're not at a place right now where we're ready to issue debt for the Soldiers and Sailors building. There's still quite a lot to do there with the design and bidding before we have anything that's ready for construction. So the kind of path that I'm expecting that we'll follow is to roll forward the bands into another set of bands that would mature the following July. Then sometime between now and then, if the Soldiers and Sailors building is ready to go in terms of needing to sign a construction contract, we could at that point either issue permanent debt for both projects and roll the water bands into that, or depending on the amount of time we have, we could issue bands for the Soldiers and Sailors, and then next July merge those two together. So that's the kind of calendar that I've been talking about with Hilltop Securities, and so I wanted to talk this over with the board to see if you think we're on the right track.
Well, the main point is, I had thought, well, if the water department project is going forward, and why are we not just going ahead and borrowing the full, just putting the bonds out there now? But the economies of scale of putting the projects together and then putting it out, the bonds out, one bond rather than two separate bonds is still is such that it's still cheaper for us to continue with the bond anticipation notes rather than just doing the bonding of the two projects separately. So even though we're going to have to pay some costs to set these up, it's still, according to Angus's research, it's still going to be cheaper than doing one separately this summer and another one after we know what's happening with the carpost. So that's the situation. Is that right, Angus? Would you say that's
exactly right? Yep.
So if even though it's probably a little bit of more work, we have to do the same thing again, but we will be saving the town, ultimately saving the town some money, unless, I guess you could argue, unless interest rates really spiked in the next year, but which is highly unlikely because the Federal Reserve is going to be wanting to make the economy churn better, and that's not going to happen by raising interest rates. Angus, one question. Because of not just us, but municipal finance cities and towns are not going to be as good of a financial situation as they, they were until very recently. Is there any possibility that because of that, a year from now, maybe our financial situation isn't as good and that our rate would be cranked up significantly because that, and ultimately we lose out? Is that a possibility?
I would never tell you it's not a possibility. And you can see from the kind of additional questions that Hilltop has sent us for the official statement, and
You did see those, yeah.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot there where they're very focused on COVID-19, what the town's plans are, how prepared we are, as well as what impacts we would expect to have as a result of, for instance, declining state revenue. So I think based on the financial structure in West Newbury, we're less exposed to that, at least in the near term, I mean, the next year or more, because our, we're heavily reliant on the tax base as opposed to state aid. But as has been discussed elsewhere, there's also, ripple effects if, for instance, the state reduces funding to regional school districts and the impact that could have on the town budget. So that's a really good question. And, I did ask Hilltop for an additional analysis to kind of break out the dollars of what we would gain by taking this approach versus what it would cost if we separately, issued long-term debt for the water and then separately issued long-term debt for the soldiers and sailors. I haven't received that yet, but I'm happy to report back on this issue at the next meeting and see if I can't get some firm numbers in front of you, as well as to get their thoughts on that risk factor that you outlined of, what if a year from now.
Yeah, I noticed the questions they asked were very specific about what's happening right now, but they didn't really ask what's going to happen a year from now. That's a whole, I suppose nobody knows, and they don't know either. But how about this, Angus? Could you ask them what if what would happen if, what would be the outcome if say our interest rate went up 1.5 points?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yep.
I don't even know what number to pick, but say that isn't even a huge amount, but say, your town, they could argue your town is having this problem and we want to charge you 1.5 points more. Maybe, I don't know. It'd be just interesting to know what would how much that would cost us to wait.
Yep.
Or am I being too conservative? I don't know.
No, I don't think you are. I mean, that's the issue. These long-term financing, this is obviously, it's a big, it's something that implicates the town's money for many years to come. So I would never say that you're, being too conservative or, I think those are great questions, and I can work with Hilltop and we can get you more information on that. So.
Okay. I don't want to hold things up. I just, a lot has changed in the last 2 months. That's all. Yeah. Rick, you want to comment on the next item? It's about the town land.
Yeah, okay, so, a couple of weeks ago, Brian Murphy and I, Brian is current chair of the planning board. I had, if you might recall, 6 or 8 months ago, I had mentioned that I wanted to explore the land, our industrial zone land, to see if there was potential to do something with it. And really, I was thinking along the lines of, is there any possibility at all that a significantly sized, sort of commercial sized solar PV installation could be placed there. The land is challenged. It's a little triangle of land on the east side of I-95, the only land in West Newbury on the east side of I-95, and also the only industrially zoned land in West Newbury. It's behind the state police barracks, bordered, of course, by I-95 on one side, by wetlands on another side, has no frontage on any road. Access to the land in West Newbury would have to be from Scotland Road in Newbury, across land in Newbury. So there were a bunch of challenges to the land, but still it's zoned industrial, so it was worth exploring whether or not we might be able to do something with it. So Brian and I took a leisurely walk through the brush and the tangle, and worked our way out and found beautiful hardwood, well, actually mixed forest. Part of it's all softwood, part of it's hardwood, but very rugged terrain. A lot of steep ledge, big boulders. I mean, some of it's not like that, but it's sort of dominated by difficult terrain. And our conclusion was, between the terrain challenges and the fact that there's mature forest there, which is not, it's not incentivized, I'll say, for solar, to remove forest for solar installation. The conclusion was that it really is not a viable site. So it's quite honestly, it's a bummer, because we don't have any. It is the only industrial zone land in town, and it would have been the one place where nobody would have objected in West Newbury to installing solar there.
Rick, what about on the other tack? What about as a site for a turbine?
No, there's not going to be enough wind there. Years ago, you might not have been on. You probably weren't on the Board of Selectmen, but we had gotten a grant which was approved by the Board of Selectmen. We being at that point, the Energy Advisory Committee. This probably goes back to, 2008 or 2009, something like that. And we got a grant from the state, from DOER, to evaluate potential sites in West Newbury for wind. Was there any site viable in West Newbury for wind? And the only site, there are, there's actually a set of maps or mapping for the entire country, broken up into small elements for wind resource modeling. And based on that information, the only site in West Newbury that was a potential candidate was Brake Hill. And when they actually did the analysis, it was even that was not a viable, not an economically viable site for wind. People go up to Page School and they say, it's really windy here, why don't we have a wind turbine here? I've heard that back in that time frame. Multiple people said that, but the reality is that you need, for a good wind resource, you need a steady wind in, a consistent wind regime, sort of a consistent velocity profile. And we don't have anything like that in town. So,
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's the long and short of it. So, Brian and I got a chance to talk a little bit as we were walking around out in the woods.
Next item is a discussion about the existing noise bylaw, and should we deal with that, or Rick, do you want to talk a little background on that, or?
Sure. I was contacted by somebody who lives on Crane Neck Street who has a neighbor with a frequently used and audibly unpleasant leaf blower, and who is persistent. And so they were trying to determine whether or not there was anything that could be done to, from a town regulation standpoint, that could be done to cause their neighbor to tone things down a bit. And they had already looked at the town bylaws. I also looked at the town zoning bylaw. There is, reference to noise under intensity of use, I think, that section of the zoning bylaws. I talked with Sam, Angus and I have communicated on it. Within our existing town bylaws, we really don't have any effective means to control something like that. But it really, to me, it brings up a bigger question, which is, is there more of an issue than in town with problematic noise? I don't have a good sense for how common it is. I also don't have a good sense of how to help out this particular resident, or family. So I thought it was something we had to talk about. How do we address it on a larger scale? I suspect there are other people in town who have similar problems, or analogous, maybe not equivalent, but analogous problems with noise. And it looks like our existing bylaw is really not enforceable without us investing significant resources. And Angus pointed out that there's some state limitations based on state law on what we can do. Although I got an email today, from the resident with some references that I haven't had a chance to look at to other communities. I think Haverhill was one of them. I didn't have a chance really to dig into it at all. But so maybe there's some modeling we can take from other communities' bylaws that would help us out. But I don't know if you have any thoughts about it, Archie, or Angus, if you have any other further comments.
Well, it's kind of an interesting area of regulation. The DEP regulations which apply statewide set, an audible nuisance as basically, certain decibels above ambient. So establishing what is ambient noise is it's actually a pretty big part of the challenge of enforcement for the state regs. But part of what's interesting is the state regs fall under the health department authority, whereas because we do have a local zoning bylaw, as Rick pointed out, the building inspector is the zoning enforcement officer. So Sam has, and I believe he's on the call, but I don't see, he may be called in, so he's a numbered caller rather than, I can't see his name, but I believe our building inspector, Sam Jocelyn, is on the call. He's had a lot
I am on the line.
Oh, good. Okay, great. So he can speak up as well. But he and I also consulted with Paul Savigny because obviously Paul's been in town a lot longer, and we were interested in whether his office had been contacted over the years for requests for enforcement under the state regulations. But one of the kind of challenges with enforcement is the equipment that's needed, which you can borrow from DEP, but you still need someone who's trained in operating that equipment. But I think a kind of a broader question that I would like to get some guidance from the board is, what level of regulation do you want to apply? Because as Rick said, it would take significant resources in terms of the sound equipment, the actual time to measure to establish that there's in fact a violation. And, some towns, I guess I'm still trying to get a sense of this town and how far you want to go with that. But to me, I hear about a leaf blower, and I feel that that's something that a conversation between two neighbors might be more effective than the town coming in with kind of the heavy hand of regulation. But, I'll take my cues from the board, but.
Well, Angus, maybe I can just elaborate a little bit. In this particular case, the neighbor has made, the resident has made significant effort to reach out to their neighbor, to communicate with them. And it sounds as though the neighbor may actually take some delight in making it worse, or not working with their neighbor. The simple conversation, I think, has already been tried. So, and I understand the broad question that you're saying, but just to, sort of, elaborate on this one a little bit further.
I think it's it's always a question of how do you, as with a lot of things, it's a question of enforcement. I mean, do you have I don't know the specifics of this, but would you have to have a recording and a time-stamped recording to determine that this particular decibel level occurred at 7 a.m. or whatever? How do these work? Even if you had the equipment and someone to do it, if no one's doing it at the time you go to then analyze it, then it's gonna. If someone's there recording them, they're probably going to turn the device off. I don't know. I'm just playing devil's advocate.
Yeah. Yep.
If it was recording me, I'd certainly turn it off.
That's right. And I think these issues most often are addressed in, as civil matters between two private parties. And it's partly for those reasons, Archie. It is extraordinarily difficult to enforce, including for those reasons. You first of all, establishing ambient is, I believe it's 10 days of uninterrupted measuring to establish, the typical background noise, and then to establish that the actual kind of violation is above that for a sustained period of time. That implicates a lot of manpower, and if someone's out there at the property line with the sound recording equipment, it obviously can have the effect of changing behaviors, and you can't compel someone to go run their leaf blower when you want them to. So that's where, I mean, I've dealt with this quite a bit in other towns, and came to the same conclusion. I mean, whether you're dealing with there was one instance where there was a Franco-American club that was nestled into a residential neighborhood, and there were routinely gatherings and loud noise and so forth. But I think one instance where I think a town, in my opinion, would or kind of justifiably take that step of looking at more an enforcement is if there's an existing apparatus that creates a sustained period of noise, whether that's a generator, or I know Mike McCarron had an example from his private sector experience with, I believe it was a repair garage that was next to a residential neighborhood, something that really was a kind of sustained day in and day out impact. And that's something where, if push comes to shove, the town can, request that equipment from DEP. You still have the manpower issues of, do you have a staff person out there for days on end doing nothing more than recording noise? I mean, it's a resource issue. If you're with a larger organization and you've got a bunch of staff and you can delegate someone, great. But that's not the case here. I just wonder with really a civil matter, a neighbor matter, does it help things if the building inspector shows up with his business card and basically comes down on one side or the other? And I'm not so sure that it would. It might kind of sour that relationship between those neighbors even further.
Yeah.
Mike, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, the noise ordinance is geared towards fixed items, a sound that's going to be generated from something that's really not movable, like a leaf blower, that can go on and off intermittently. It's usually it affects something where the sound is constant and fixed to the site. So a couple of examples were a circumstance where there was a generator that was literally on the property line that would go off and be considerably loud, and it was always going off. And so it was easy enough to basically test the noise level because it was right there and it didn't move. And the same thing with the private garage, the auto repair area, which was cured by shutting the door and buying an air conditioner. So yeah, I mean it goes to those things. The neighborhood thing that is intermittent is very difficult to enforce, almost impossible. In fact, that's why the state regulations exempt them. It's this is an issue that is quite in the forefront in places like Brookline and Newton, where they actually do have regulations on leaf blowers and time when people can do it, and it's quite the neighborhood problem.
One thing we did in another community I worked in, actually that Franco-American Club example, we reached the conclusion, the town did, that regulation really wasn't going to be the answer in this instance. So what we did in that case was we initiated a good neighbor agreement, which was a voluntary agreement between the parties. And we had a series of meetings to mediate the issues and to give both sides an opportunity to, express their point of view. And we worked toward getting to writing. It was non-binding, it was non-regulatory, but it was a good faith effort to try to, get people at least communicating in a way that, there was some real tension there that had gone back years. So I think, it's not that you can't do anything. I just don't know, in my experience, that regulation, that's not always the answer. Because, if the building inspector goes out there, with his business card and, alleges a violation, when in fact he doesn't have a basis, he doesn't have the data to know if it's a violation.
Yep.
In that view, I could see that being viewed as kind of taking sides in a neighbor issue. Sam, are you on? Do you have an observation?
Yep, I'm on. When I was in Newbury, I did a number or extensive looking into how to regulate noise issues within the town, because it's a very similar community to West Newbury. And we ran into the same issues that, if you take the highly, technical route, resources and equipment are just unrealistic. Other than that, you're just taking a subjective route and you're kind of picking sides. And we found really a lot of the times it did come down to a civil matter between those neighbors and, just trying to get along. The other thing we relied on was the Board of Health regulations, and the things they exempted, or reached out to the state to see if they could be of any help. And of course, most of the time they weren't of much help, because much like the cities and towns, they don't have those resources to spend, tons of hours out there. So it's a tough one. I'd certainly be willing to take a look at, other cities and towns regulations to see if there's something out there that at least gives us something to hang our hats on in some instances. But this is a tough one where you've got a neighbor who, it seems like may realize what he's doing is not desirable to his neighbor and isn't really willing to fix the problem. Most of the time with that situation where I can go out and take I don't want to say take a side, but have a conversation with both neighbors. A lot of times that does help and just resolve the situation, saying, hey, I didn't know if you realized there was a situation. But it sounds like that's already been somewhat vetted in this situation. So I don't know if that'll particularly help here.
Yeah. Okay.
Rick, is there something else going on? In other words, is this an escalation of something else? And so
not as I understand, Archie. I think it's actually been something that has been tolerated for a long period of time, and that I believe there was a recent incident, sort of related to a holiday and maybe I'm trying to recall. I don't want to air people's personal experiences at all, but I think there had been a death in the family, and then there was a holiday, and the neighbor seemed to be particularly aggressive in their noise making and sort of pushed them over the edge, which is, I think, what led to me being contacted. So I also, I don't know the owner of the leaf blower, so I don't know what I can't tell you more.
right.
But but it just seems important. I mean, we all need to live together, and just trying to make sure that can happen and that everybody can live in peaceful enjoyment of their property.
So I would say, do a little digging and see if there's anything that is not too complex that another community might do. Let's look at that.
Yeah. So Sam, I see you're still on. I mean, it may
Yep.
At some point perhaps it'll make sense, for you to be asked if you could just speak with a neighbor. And I believe this typically happens around the same time each day, which is not during work hours. It's I think typically in the evening, based on what was explained to me. And but not within. I read what you had sent, Angus. And the limitation and what you sent was by the state DEP was between the hours of 7 a.m. and 9 p.m. You couldn't operate. Or you couldn't limit operation of lawnmowers and certain other equipment. And so I don't know how this all fits together, but maybe having a third party speak would, I don't want this to become a major issue for this meeting. By the way, we've spent a fair amount of time already talking about it. I guess we're going to get anywhere, but maybe it would help at some point. And I will speak with the person who contacted me again and see if they would like to try to pursue that route.
Yep. And if the board and town manager decide that's the route, I'm more than comfortable, going, just knocking on door, having a casual conversation, or not. And I'm more than happy to, again, look into revising the bylaw as well. So whatever works for you guys.
Explore that and see if there is something that looks like it would be enforceable. And okay, great. Thank you.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Alrighty. Have a good night.
Yeah. Thanks, Sam. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Sam.
Bye-bye.
Okay, we got some minutes in the interest of time. I make a motion to approve the minutes of May 4th, April 28th, April 13th, and April 9th. I saw no problems. They were very well done.
I'll second that. Although
Rick, was the one last time that you had a problem with?
Yeah, and I went back and looked at it, and I don't. I sort of reread it, and I didn't have a problem. But I do have a question though now, and it's really a question to Mike, and it isn't a question the accuracy of the minutes, but it's on when we were talking about the planning board zoning article changes, and we spoke a little bit about the regulation of riding stables, and the planning board took that out. And what I've highlighted in here was where it says town clerk / council elucidated that by removing riding stables from section 5A3B, it prohibits riding stables on land less than 5 acres, and keeping it in would allow an individual the opportunity to apply for a special permit. And the question that came to mind is, people already who have less than 5 acres and already have a riding stable and don't have a special permit, are they grandfathered or something? Or is this going to open up now that?
No,
I mean, I know this part of the article of the planning board article was dropped. Yeah, it was removed. But are people who have on 2 acres who have a small stable and a horse, are they now?
Okay, I mean, remember the difference. There's a difference between having your own horse and having a riding stable, which is usually meant for a business operation.
Yeah.
And so you have that distinction. And as to whether or not there's existing ones that may be out there on less than 5 acres, each case is going to be different, because there's going to be, they could be grandfathered. They could be permitted otherwise. So you'd have to take it's a very fact intensive review for each particular one. So I wouldn't say there's the general rule one way or another. I mean, other than the fact is that if you wanted to establish one today, you'd need to get a special permit.
Okay, that's fine. Great, thanks. So it sounds like that pretty much answers it. Thanks. So I'm good, Archie.
Okay, so all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Angus has a few updates, and then we're almost done.
Okay, so on the FinCom booklet, that's been the committee's been hard at work on that. My office has been adding the ingredients that we do. There are a couple of elements this year that haven't been part of prior years' booklets that I think are pretty good. One is a breakdown of the proposed budget by percent across the various departments, and that also translates to a table on how each $1,000 of your property taxes are allocated across the organization. So I think that's going to be really neat. That's, I think, going to help, communicate the information in a different way. We've got some good data in there of how the taxes have changed over the prior 10 years, both in the aggregate, the average single-family tax bill, the change from prior years in dollars and percent. So I think there's a number of elements the committee's been working hard to get to help make the information very accessible and relevant. So I don't know exactly when that will be circulated. In the normal course of things, it would have been brought to the printer this Wednesday with a change that was decided earlier tonight with the postponement of town meeting. I think that will push things back a little bit, but that booklet is well underway. The next update is just, and I actually already spoke to this earlier this evening, just to make you aware that the Board of Appeals is also at work on looking at its regulations and is going to have a meeting next Tuesday where it will advance the process on the regulations. And finally, you have just a brief summary in there from our DPW director on the continued work that we're doing to ensure compliance with our EPA general permit for stormwater management. None of these requirements have eased in any way with the COVID. So we're still focused on that and should be in a position to, have a clean bill of health when we do our annual report for the current year.
Placing items on futures. Rick, anything that we need to think about?
Nope, nothing else for me at the moment.
I would just ask this as a question, Angus. Do you see any value in seeing how our revenue to date in doing that again in 2 weeks? See how our revenue for this fiscal year coming in is doing versus previous years, or is that was that a waste of time? I'm just throwing it out there.
I don't think it's a waste of time. It's just a matter of, I got to check with the town accountant on how, what kind of backlog she has on posting the revenues. I do know that, as you know, we've had, pretty extended period of short staffing there. So I want to make sure that that's something she can get those. Because if we're going to review it, I'd like to have current numbers rather than,
Okay.
When we did it a couple of weeks ago, as you know, the numbers at that point we went back, almost 2 months. So if we're going to do it, I want to make sure we have good data, and I can't commit that without checking with her, since she's the one who posts that data.
And in the opposite direction too, how we're doing. That would be the end of May, so we're 11/12 of the way through the year. See how we're doing versus the budget too in the expense side of things.
Mm-hmm. The budget document I know I updated the year-to-date spending through, I think it was through sometime in April. So it's still, more than a month old. But running a report of year-to-date expenses is actually, that's a lot simpler, because those get posted right when
Right.
AP warrant goes through. So those numbers are more reliable. So yeah, I could circulate that, and that's a report I can run. That's easy.
Okay. I'm trying to think what. So again, we're getting towards the end of the fiscal year. If there are, we'll have to be thinking about appointments again, and maybe we want to send out a letter. How did we handle it last year, Angus, in terms of whether people wanted to re-op or that kind of thing?
We contacted people whose terms were expiring to confirm their interest in going forward. So I think we would do the same thing again this spring. Last year we were, short-staffed for those, April, May, June. So that was kind of me doing that myself. So I don't know that I think prior to, prior years, I think the town maybe was more formal with sending a letter. We did not do that last spring. We didn't have anywhere near the, manpower to do that. So maybe that's something you and I can connect on this week. And, if there's a certain way you want it done, we're happy to do that, working with my staff and with the clerk's office.
Okay. And I'd like to know if we've been keeping up. I still think it's a good time when people re-op to find out their status, whether they've done the ethics tests and all that too. I kind of like to tie those two things together. It's a good time to catch people, basically. Yeah.
One thing we have been chipping away at in the last couple of weeks is there's a one-page form that prior to not long ago, the only one we had completed was from the Mill Pond Committee, but it's basically a one-pager that designates who's the committee member, responsible for posting agendas, responsible for posting minutes, and responsible for updating the website.
That is, yeah.
Really good information for my office, and I haven't had that information because those forms were never completed. So we've taken advantage of the one of our workers who's working remotely has been able to contact all of the chairs by phone and by email and is wrangling all that information because it's really, really helpful to my office to know if, you know, for instance, an agenda is not posted to the web, who to contact rather than, you know, fishing around. And so
Great, yeah. Okay. Thank you all.
Archie,
Yeah,
just a reminder, I mean, I know we talked a long time about postponing town meeting, but the town election is going forward on June 3rd. But everyone who is concerned about going in, and we will be practicing social distancing throughout the election time and having precautions for people who want to come to the polling place to vote. But I just remind people that they can also early vote by filling out the application, which is on the town clerk's webpage, and sending it in to me, and we can mail you a ballot, and then you can get it back. So we'd encourage people to do that.
and that date being,
June 3rd.
okay,
The June 3rd is the election. But get it, you have, since you have to, I have to mail you the ballot, you really got to get me your application probably by that Friday. You know, what is it, 29th or something like that, to give us some time to, you know, for the mail to get to me. And for me to mail you a ballot.
Hey, Mike, I've always wondered something like that. Can somebody drop that form off in the payment
Yes.
box? Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
absolutely.
So
The mailing requirement is I have to mail you the ballot.
right.
Yes, you're encouraged to drop it off. And if you can even scan the application as long as you have your original signature that you scanned and
Yeah.
email it to me.
Okay.
And that's good enough too. You can do that right then.
Oh,
And the
okay.
applications are available on my website, on my page of the town website, or on the Secretary of State's website.
Okay.
So you could download it, fill it out, scan it, send it to the town clerk at wnewbury.org, and and I'll mail you a ballot.
Okay.
have you been getting many?
We
Mike?
have over probably 70 applications now for early ballots. It's which is more than, well, last year was a little bit different because we had 1,900 votes because of the school voting, but not counting last year, that's more than we've ever had for early, you know, absentee/early ballots. But yeah, so obviously I think that if anyone has any concern at all about going to the polling place, they are encouraged to send it in.
Yeah, and that number will probably go up because there's still another 2 weeks, a little over 2 weeks for people to
Right.
get youth form. Yeah.
I got the ballots last Thursday, and so Diane is helping me remotely to prepare all those, and I should be mailing out the first batch tomorrow.
Great.
Okay, thank you all. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
A second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.